Hey everybody, I am Toby Feldman. I am the Resilient AF Midlife Mama. And today I want to talk about mental health over academics, like all day, every day. Um, I have such a passion for this topic. So, mental health over academics. Parents, schools, got to get on the same page. Um, I mean, really, like, does anyone out there not have a kid who's feeling the stress? Is Show me the kids that aren't feeling stress right now. Um, and I'm not even talking about kids with neurodiversity. I'm not talking about kids with brain injury. I'm not talking about just teens. I'm talking about kids all ages. I'm talking about um, um, generally all the kids. The bottom line is that when there is any level of stress, our kids are going to shut down. Their executive function is going to shut down. And that's going to look like various things, and it's going to create a vortex. So, executive functioning, like this, it's such a buzzword, and I talk about it all the time. I am like, this is my thing. Um, and it's basically how we get stuff done, and it's essential for being functional. So what I want to do today is explain some basic like brain science, um, um, because it helps to understand why we can't keep pushing these kids into the academics and pushing school and assignments and all of these things when they're not capable of taking it in. We're constantly pushing, like it's that square peg in the round hole thing. And so I want you to understand like the nuts and bolts about why this isn't um, about our kids being resistant or lazy or stupid or ignorant or rebellious. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about their essential, they are essential, their executive function shutting down, and why it shuts down, and why they're um, they're functioning differently. So I'm going to give you like a little bit of science. Bear with me. So executive function is all like it's here in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. It's like the conductor of the orchestra. And then we have the limbic system with the amygdala. Okay, so these are parts of the brain. And the amygdala is where we have the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, right? So I'm going to break that down a little bit further. And I want you to think about it. My visual has always been what they call the window of tolerance. So I want you to think about the window in your house, right? Okay, so you've got this window and you're pushing it up a little bit and you're creating some space to open the window and let the air flow through, okay? So I just want you to keep that visual in your mind, and I'll explain why later. So when we look at the sympathetic nervous system, we're talking about when we go into fight or flight. For whatever reason, we're like something's going on, or there's stress, trauma, whatever it is, pressure, whatever. But our system goes into fight or flight, and we don't feel safe. And this looks like rage or panic or fear. We have too much energy. This is when there's like running away or yelling or defensiveness, that like I don't care attitude. They can't register consequences. And this is not just, I say they because I'm talking about the kids, but I'm really talking about everybody, right? So, which is important to note, because if it's happening to me, it's rubbing off on them, right? So it's a whole nother conversation. So they can't register consequences. And we know when we can't register consequences, stuff happens. Okay, so sympathetic nervous system up here. Down here, we've got parasympathetic nervous system. This is where there's like that freeze, disassociation, no feeling, numb, lack of energy, exhausted, moving slowly, not getting out of bed, checked out, giving up. These are the things that we often see when our kids are struggling for whatever reason. And again, I started this by saying, I'm not just talking about teens. I'm not just talking about neurodiverse kids. I'm not just talking about kids with even like mental health diagnoses. I'm talking about just your average kid right now. And our goal is to keep them in the middle, in that open window space. Okay, the window of tolerance. That's the goal, is to keep them there where they feel safe, where there's communication and connection and self-control and love and joy and peace and patience and all those things that allow us to feel safe and aware of ourselves and be in relationship and able to focus, be logical, reason, problem solve, be resilient, to have optimal energy. All of those things are critical, right? Those are the things that we need for us to function, for our brains to function. We need to be in that window of tolerance so that all those things can happen. And when we're not in that window of tolerance, when we're in either side of this, we're not functioning. Our brain is not, our executive functions aren't working. And when our executive functions aren't working, we're not working and we're not getting stuff done. And it's that they can't do the things. I want you guys to hear this so clearly. They can't do the things. Can't, not won't, can't. They are not able to do those things that we're asking them to do. It's not lazy or stupid or any of those things that come up. And when they get into this place, they spiral into believing the messages that they're hearing from parents or school or friends or whoever. And they start to spin in the guilt and the shame and the worthlessness and not feeling connected. And this is where the problems start. This is where particularly, I'm going to say particularly with teens, because that's like that's like my zone. But, we're seeing it younger and younger. This is where the problems start with drugs, self-harm, suicidal ideation, eating disorders, name it, right? Like all the things. And that's because when they're in that freeze mode under the window, and they're in that freeze mode, they are desperate to feel. So they're doing things to feel. That's why kids cut, because they want to feel. And when they're in that fight or flight above the window, that's when they're desperate to calm down. That's where they lean into drugs or any other addiction that helps them to calm down. And this is, again, like it's all humans, right? So like any of the things we do, like even if it's just scrolling on Facebook, because we just need that break, like that mental, not that Facebook is such a mental break right now, but this is the goal, is to keep the window of tolerance open for our kids. Let me just check over here on my other screen because I think I see. Yes. Hi, Hillary. Dealing with your son is diabetic care along with everything else. So stressful. I see some of your posts, like I have other friends who have kids dealing with monitoring their numbers, and it's scary, stressful. It's hard to keep someone in a window of tolerance when they're in that physical space of needing to constantly be monitoring, right? And I will tell you personally that as much as I knew and heard and preached to school that mental health was more important than academics for my kid still wanted to go to school because it was a social experience and they needed to be with their friends and they wanted to be out of the house. But when they got there, they couldn't do the things. And there were things that I could advocate for. But when you have teens, they don't want you to necessarily to advocate for them. They want to do it themselves. So you need to teach them. We need to teach them how to advocate for themselves, how to tell school what they need so that they can function. And sometimes that means saying, I can't do this assignment. Can I have a different assignment? Can you make adjustments to this assignment? I can't do this right now. And teachers need to understand that this is where kids are coming from. It's not that they're looking to get out of doing something. They're looking to give you what they can offer in the moment. We need to focus on their interests because that's going to help them too. It's really hard if they're not interested at all, right? And they need to have choices. For some kids, this goes back to like other learning stuff, providing directions with auditory and visual cues, giving them, written assignments and verbal assignments, also giving them choices of how they can present material. My kid got to a point where writing an assignment was just too much. So I said, isn't the goal here to show mastery of skill? Can you arrange a time to sit down and talk to my kid and get that they get it, get that they know their stuff, they've mastered the skills, and give them that opportunity to show that without the pressure of having to write it down. We got to think outside the box for the sake of our kids. We need to give them breaks. They need to have movement and hydration and nourishment. Sitting on a screen all day, we know, right? Sitting in a classroom all day, like give them some movement. Fitting in mindfulness, teaching them mindfulness, helping them with, things, time management things like time blocking and planning projects backwards. There are so many things that we can do and that we can teach them to advocate to be able to do to support themselves mentally in an academic environment, whether it's in school or out of school. They need to learn. We need to learn what they need, but they more importantly need to learn what they need, especially as teens. They need to know what they need and they need to know how to ask for it. They need to be able to say, things are really intense for me right now and I just can't do this. And not feel guilty and shame because it just is what it is. And school teachers, administrators need to understand where our kids are coming from right now and that they need to be able to ask for what they need and have it be honored. And we also need to teach our kids skills. I'm going to go back to mindfulness because I think it's really important for kids to be able to have that space within a classroom setting or even at home to be in touch with their mindfulness, to check in with where they are. So the school that my kid was going to I forget what they call it now, but every time they got into a new classroom, they had like this thing that they did at the very beginning of the class to give them a moment to collect and regroup. It was like 30 seconds it was really brief, but it was a moment to just breathe breathe and let whatever happened in the hallway go, and whatever text you just read go, and whatever came from home go, and just sort of like breathe and be present to where they are right now. But it needs to go further than that. They need to breathe and be present and self-aware and check in and know where they are and what they need, and then ask for it. And know that they're going to be heard. I think that's the biggest piece for me, is like knowing that they're going to be heard. Because there are a lot of things, you know, if they're not in their window of tolerance, none of the things are going to get in. It's just not. No matter how hard we try, no matter how much we hammer it in, they're just not going to get it. So a couple other things that are helpful in these moments. Mel Robbins, 5-4-3-2-1. Works for some kids, doesn't work for others. Works for some adults, doesn't work for others. So 5-4-3-2-1, and do the thing. It is a way to break the rhythm and to kind of switch the brain a little bit. And sometimes it's enough to kind of like snap back into that window of tolerance. That mindfulness. My favorite go-to right now is the Aroma Freedom Reset. Being able to check in with, this is how I'm feeling right now. This is where it is in my body. This is what's going on for me. That self-awareness. And using the oils to breathe in. So you're also getting that, like that breathing and that mindfulness piece. But it's getting in, those oils get in to the limbic system. They're the only things that can get there. And they get in there, and then they are able to sometimes, you know, they can flip that switch and maybe do the thing. And it's such an amazing thing to watch. And it's a simple tool. It's a simple tool that they can use over and over again. So that's one of the things that I lean on a lot. But I really want to go back to, and I'm going to share personally again, like when our kids are in this place, and I've seen my kids go, and I'm sure you have too. I've seen my kids go into these different places, just like I've seen it with myself, right? But when you're a kid and you're not, and your brain isn't fully developed, so let's go back to that brain science. The brain isn't fully developed until they're mid to late 20s. So if you've got this undercooked brain and a kid that's like deep into fight flight mode, and for them it's survival mode, and then they can't register consequences because they're in that space, it's a recipe for disaster. And there's a lot of once they get to that place and they do the things. So for mine, running away was a thing, one of many things, but once they run away, once they do the thing, they also feel like there's no going back. They feel like it's hard for them to get back in the space of it's okay, I did this thing. And now maybe I've like calmed down and I'm back in my window of tolerance. But now I'm sucked into that guilt and shame, and I don't know how to get back. So it's so important for us as adults and parents and educators to be paying attention to all these signs with our kids, to checking in with them, to figuring out where they are, to seeing the signs of them being in this hyper or hypo arousal state, and identifying what it is and helping them come back into the window of tolerance. And sometimes that window of tolerance is small, and our goal is to make it bigger, to grow it for them. I love the resilience is my thing, right? So it's that window of tolerance is all about resilience. The more we take care of ourselves, the more self-care we do, the more work we do on ourselves, the more resilient we are, the greater our window of tolerance is. And the wider that window can be open and kept open, the less we're going to go into those end states. And that's the magic. That's what we're aiming for. And the challenge is, I'm going to go back to the beginning, that mental health over academics. The challenge is that the second our kids go into this, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but like I heard this everywhere over the last couple of weeks. Kids were on winter break and then they were going back, and there were mental breakdowns all over the place because the kids didn't want to go back to school. Because the second they go into that environment, whether it's virtual or not, there's pressure and there's stress and there's demands being made on them that many of them cannot meet right now. They just can't. We have to look at that and see how we can help them. Now I'm going to get emotional. This is such like, this is, I've seen it all with my kids at levels that I wish upon no one. So here's what I'm offering right now. I have, there's a link for my email list. I'm coming out with a lot of materials right now. I'm going to have this whole window of tolerance. I'm working on a visual for people to have as a resource. If you want that, if you want to know about my book and course that are going to be coming out before the spring, then get on my email list and you'll be the first to get all the information as it comes out. And I'll also put in like, special discounts for things and all of that. I also have a link to my AFT. Whether you want to schedule an AFT for you or for your kid or as a family, or if you just want to schedule like a free 15-minute consult and learn how to do a reset with your kids, I'm down for that. I just want to get this stuff out there and help our kids as much as we can. What was the other thing I put up there? Oh, my Resilient AF Midlife Mama group. So really anybody who's raising teens or young adults who is just looking for a space to do their own work, to dig into themselves. It's a beautiful emerging community. So I welcome you to come join us there. And there was something else I was going to tell you. Let me see what the comments are. Maybe it will trigger me. So let's see. Oh, Karen. Yeah. The first 2 days of homeschool were rough. Yeah. It's, getting back into that routine is so hard when it pushes all those buttons. That's what you're going through, Hillary. Yeah. Mamas, we got to be here for each other. That's all I'm going to say. Especially for these older kids, like there's no play dates, there's no play groups, there's no opportunities anymore for moms to hang out. And like, we used to sit around and talk about, is it teething or cold? And like, what do you, what foods are they eating? I mean, all those things. And we had all this great support, and then they're teens and you're like, we're thrown out there. So, oh, the other thing, I am working on an ULA coaching workshop for teens. I'm putting it together. I really think that part of the challenge that we have is that our kids don't have goals. They don't, right now, what I'm hearing from a lot of kids, I'm working on a project with some young adults, and they're grim about their future. And so they don't have goals because they're not thinking about the future, because they don't see what it could possibly look like for them. And so I'm putting together a workshop for teens to work on goals and to work and for them to also realize, I just did it. I kind of did a little one with mine. And what was really cool was that life is so much more than what's happening at school, right? Like there's all these other things in your life to get excited about and have goals about and work towards. And it just really helped him to sort of flesh out and see how amazing things could be. And it got him really excited about things that he hadn't really thought about doing. So, so if you're interested in that, let me know. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a beta group. So as this fleshes out, just yeah, let me know if your kid might be interested in being part of that first round to try it out. So I think that's it. Let's see, gratitude journals for the kids. Oh my gosh, gratitude for the kids. That's a really important one because they tend to gravitate to seeing all the things that are going wrong in their lives. So being able to point to gratitude is so, so important. Vitaflex on their feet. I could do anything on my kids' feet. It makes them happy, Karen. And focus music. Yeah. So we do a lot of focus music and diffusing and the dog. Although right now, I think the dog is in my office. But yeah, like a lot of times my son will lay down and read his work with the dog. And it's like calming. So anyway, my time is up. Hillary's interested. Cool. Hillary, I will reach out to you. Yeah, and if anybody else watches this on the replay and you're interested, just send me a private message. And that's it. Be well, stay resilient, stick in your window of tolerance, and I'll see you next week.